Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's week 18. These are my quarterback, tight end, and defensive rankings, the last rankings video of this year's season. We will give you the injury updates tomorrow, but there are some games on Saturday, so wanted to make sure I got this video out in time. There are 6 teams with question marks regarding benching starters, and the most obvious one would be the Kansas City Chiefs. Travis Kelce and Noah Gray. I don't think you can start. Obviously, Mahomes will be benched as well. But the Bills are also going to bench starters reportedly after the first drive or perhaps the second. There's no way they play into the second quarter. That's for sure. So if you have Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, and even Dawson Knox, I wouldn't trust them at all. The Rams are also benching starters, so Stafford and Tyler Higbee, can't trust them. And then the Eagles also benching starters. Jalen Hurts still in the concussion protocol, and Dallas Goedert still on IR. But according to reports, it does sound like now the Texans have changed their mind, or maybe I just got some false information. I thought they would bench their starters from the get-go, and that does sound like what will happen. So no CJ Stroud or Dalton Schultz in your lineup. Stroud has been playing like shit. And then there's a chance that if the Steelers win on Saturday, that the Chargers don't risk it and bench everyone. Justin Herbert and Will Dissly also may be not available in your lineup. But odds are if the Steelers lose that game, they'll be fine. The Chargers will be trying to get the 5 seed if that happens. So those are all of the question marks regarding who's going to play or not. If you have anybody else, if they're healthy, expect them on the field. So with that news in mind, let's get into the rankings for week 18. We begin at quarterback, where I think the top 6 all have to be in your lineup. If you have one of these quarterbacks and they've taken you this far in the fantasy championship, you have to keep them in that lineup. Joe Burrow is my number 1 guy in a must-win game on Saturday. Without Chase Brown, there's like no run game for the Bengals, and everything is going to go through Burrow. He probably throws for 350 and at least 3 touchdowns. Once again, Joe Burrow will be the best quarterback, in my opinion, this week. At number 2, I have Sam Darnold at Detroit, followed by Jared Goff versus the Vikings back-to-back. And it's a must-win game. You know for a fact they'll play the entirety of it. And the Lions' offense, combined with their lack of defense, I think keeps both of these players in the elite status. I think they both go over 30 points, but maybe don't eclipse the numbers of Joe Burrow. So I think they're all must-starts. And maybe if there wasn't a chance that Lamar Jackson could get benched early in this game, I'd probably have him at number 1 because we're expecting a blowout against the Browns, and there's also a concern that Derrick Henry might not play a ton himself. So Lamar could be ranked at number 1. I think you have to start him if you have him, but there is a chance that in the late third, early fourth quarter, if they're up by 30 points, they probably just bench Lamar because the win is all they need to lock up the division. So that's my only hesitation with Lamar, and it also applies to Jayden Daniels. If they beat the Cowboys in a blowout, they need him healthy for the playoffs. They will sit him early if they can. So Jayden Daniels probably plays well in the first half, but I do not know what the snap share will be for guys like Lamar and Jayden in the fourth quarter. So that's why they're behind Burrow, Darnold, and Goff. Despite their rushing value, I think that concern has the ceiling a bit capped. But at number 6, I'm also slightly concerned that Baker Mayfield does not finish the game himself. Against the Saints, he'll dominate. He's going to throw plenty of touchdowns to Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. But if you're telling me, just like Lamar and Jayden Daniels, if they're up 40-10 at the end of the third quarter, I wouldn't expect Baker on the field to close it out. So you're starting all 6 of these players, but I think because of the circumstances for Burrow, Darnold, and Goff, those 3 are safer to play all 4 quarters, and that's why I rank them top 3, Lamar, Jayden Daniels, and Baker in the top 6. But all of them are above this purple line. That is the tier break. I think these are the 6 you have to be starting in week 18. At number 7, I think Justin Herbert is a must start as well. Definitely a top 10 quarterback, assuming he is playing. You have to make sure that the Steelers lose on Saturday. If the Steelers win, then the Chargers are locked into the 6th seed, and there's no reason to risk it. Herbert will not play in that scenario. So that's why he's not in the elite tier, but I definitely trust him. He's played very well, very safe floor lately. And against the Raiders, him and Ladd McConkey probably dominate, along with Quentin Johnston. I would expect multiple touchdowns from Justin Herbert this week. At number 8, I have Bo Nix versus the Chiefs, who I know for a fact will play the entire game, but I don't think the ceiling is as high. Some of you believe that the Broncos are just going to demolish Kansas City and it's going to be an automatic win, but I really don't think the Chiefs give a shit whether or not they let the Broncos into the playoffs or the Bengals. If anything, I think the Chiefs would rather have Joe Burrow give Josh Allen a tough time in the first round of the playoffs. So if there's a shot to eliminate Josh Allen, I think the Chiefs would like to take that, and that's why I'm not convinced that their defense won't be locking up the Broncos and try to win despite benching starters. So that's my hesitation with Bo Nix. There's a very high floor. He probably runs it enough to offer at least like 18 points, but there's also a voice in the back of my mind that's telling me the Broncos may not perform at an elite rate this week. So that's why he's number 8. I think you have to start him if you got him, unless you have a top 6 quarterback, obviously. But other than that, I think he's probably the safest option other than Herbert this week. Then I think there's a massive tier break from number 8 to number 9. You're taking on way more risk at the position, but I don't think anyone has the ceiling that Caleb Williams offers. There are 25 30-point games from him multiple times this season, and I could envision a big lead for the Packers early on that forces Caleb to chuck it the rest of the game. And even with like 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, they could lose by like 10 points. So Caleb, I think, gets perfect game script. While the Packers are kind of a tough defense, they lost Jair Alexander. He's not available due to injury. And I expect Caleb to throw some touchdowns to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. So I think he's a top 10 option. Not many other quarterbacks offer that 20-plus point ceiling like Caleb does this week. At number 10, this might feel shocking to say, but Joshua Dobbs at Arizona, I think, is a top 10 quarterback. It sounds weird, but in the San Francisco 49ers offense, there's always a safe floor and plenty of upside. He will have that 20-point ceiling based on the weapons available, along with the play calling. You know, Shanahan will dial up something good, and his rushing ability. Last week, we saw Josh Dobbs run it in for a touchdown instead of throw it, where Purdy probably would have thrown it instead. So love that option for Josh Dobbs. That's an extra 2 points for a touchdown if it happens. And he's also in a revenge game. Last year, he did play for the Cardinals, and I think he'll play well. I see a bust-proof game from Josh Dobbs. In fantasy, he is a top 10 play, in my opinion, this week. At number 11, I have Kyler Murray in the same game, and Kyler should be ranked as quarterback 7. There's enough talent and upside for me to consider that. But he's been so disappointing, too unreliable this year to trust, and that's why I just can't rank him in the top 10. I want to do it. I definitely see a path for success, but even with a lot of quarterbacks missing this week, I do not trust Kyler as a top 10 play. I'd rather go Dobbs in the same matchup. Then at number 12, Russell Wilson has shown he can burn you lately. I doubt he fumbles it more than once, though, and that's why I still think the floor is pretty good with him. Against the Bengals, it's a decent matchup. The Bengals defense doesn't scare you at all, and George Pickens normally plays well, along with Freiermuth. He has really good stats in his career against Cincinnati, so I trust the two of them to play well. I think Russell Wilson will capitalize, and I think from a bust-proof standpoint, Russell Wilson has a high floor and a decent ceiling. There is a chance for him to also crack 20 points. So a top 12 quarterback, a must-win game. They need the 5 seed. I doubt they get it, but I'm sure they'd rather avoid the Ravens in the wildcard round. At number 13, I've got Jordan Love versus the Bears, and I want to rank Jordan Love much higher, but I feel like we've gotten such a disappointing season from him, I don't quite trust him, and the fact that Christian Watson's status is still up in the air definitely caps his upside. This offense is way more volatile with Christian Watson a part of it. So that's my concern here. I think it's more of a run-based game plan like it usually is, and that's why Jordan Love is not the safest option. Usually just a floor play, not the biggest ceiling from him this season. So hoping for a big game. I'd love to see it, but I just don't expect it. Jordan Love has been pretty tricky this year. Then at number 14, there's a lot of contract incentives at stake this week, but Geno Smith is the last player in this safe tier. If Geno Smith plays well enough, he could win up to $6 million in bonuses this week, but none of those bonuses are tied to touchdowns, nor are they tied to like a massive number of yards. All he needs is like 190 yards in order to get 2 million. He needs a 66% completion percentage to get another 2 million. If anything, that means he's not going to throw it that deep. And then he also just needs to win the game for another 2 million. So we could see a very conservative approach from Geno as well. I think he could make all 6 million this week and still have a terrible game in fantasy. That's why I'm not dying to start him. I think you're barely going to get more than 16 points from Geno Smith, but maybe he does play lights out. It is possible, and that's why he's still in this tier. I was tempted to rank him top 10, but the closer I looked into it, none of those incentives are like massive numbers in fantasy that lead to a lot of points. So that's why I'm pumping the brakes. Geno is top 15, a safe floor this week, but not the highest ceiling. Just like Jordan Love, probably only a 16-point projection, in my opinion. Then at number 15, we're taking on more risk, but honestly, I think this tier actually has some higher ceiling players than guys like Russell Wilson, Jordan Love, and Geno Smith. However, there is more of a chance that they burn you. Like Drake Maye did not play super well last week, and maybe it was the concussion, but he was cleared. Technically, there was no concussion to speak of. So Drake Maye could burn you again, but there have been some big games from him. He usually runs it well, and he also played pretty well against the Bills a couple weeks ago. So that could happen again. Sometimes he really lets you down, but that rushing upside does offer a path to 20 points. At number 16, I'm willing to test that Colts defense once again. We saw a historically bad performance last week against Drew Lock. He had an insane game, one of the best fantasy games of any quarterback this year, and no one saw that coming. So I'm not going to believe that Drew Lock is just that good. If anything, I'm going to believe that Mac Jones can torch the Colts as well. So this game is in Indianapolis. Maybe they play better, but with Brian Thomas Jr. probably going to match Malik Neighbors' stat line, I do think Mac Jones is very tempting. There is a world where he finishes top 10. I could see the same upside as Caleb Williams. We saw that hit for Drew Lock last week. So that's why I'm tempted to start Mac Jones, but at number 16, only in a 2-quarterback format would I do it. And then at 17, why not take another shot on Drew Lock after that big blow-up game I just mentioned? He played lights out. I doubt it was him, though. I really just think it was the Colts defense playing so poorly. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it really was just Drew Lock. He has Malik Neighbors to throw the ball to, and Malik Neighbors is going for a record in terms of rookie receptions. I think he'll be fine. From a floor standpoint, I think Lock has a safe path for double digits, along with like 30 rushing yards that he is capable of putting up. So he's top 20. He's not like a great option, but against the Eagles benching starters, you could do far worse than Drew Lock. At number 18, I also think you have a decent floor with Joe Flacco and perhaps a path for success. The Jags defense does not scare you, but mostly this offense in Indianapolis is driven by Jonathan Taylor, and that probably caps the upside for Flacco. I doubt he'll throw more than 2 touchdowns, and even that kind of feels risky to bet on. Then I have Bryce Young at Atlanta at number 19, and he is playing well, especially in fantasy football, but a lot of those numbers are reliant on rushing stats for his ceiling. Like, there are some games where he gives you like 35 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and with that hits, you can go over 18 with Bryce Young. But against the Falcons, who are in a must-win scenario, without Chuba Hubbard, I don't trust this offense as much. I think Thielen will be fine, but beyond that, I don't really trust Bryce Young to play lights out in the passing game against the Falcons. So no thanks. I'd rather bench him, but he is top 20 in a 2-quarterback league. I would be telling you to start him if desperate. At number 20, we have Aaron Rodgers versus Miami, the last quarterback I would want in a 10-team Superflex format. And Rodgers needs just 1 touchdown to hit 500 on his career. I expect that to happen. For sure, it will go to Devontae Adams, most definitely. But after it happens, I really don't know what Rodgers has to play for other than pride. And I did pick them to beat the Dolphins, but I could easily see the score being like 17 to 13 when it's all over. So not expecting the world from Rodgers, but the floor feels somewhat safe. There have been a few bright spots from him the last month or two. Then I think we're dropping down a significant tier where I really don't know exactly what you're going to get. Maybe it works out, but in my opinion, there's way more risk and downside to trust any of these guys. At number 21, we have Michael Penix versus the Panthers, and he did look decent the last couple games, but this matchup is way better suited for Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier on the ground, and I do expect both players to dominate. I don't trust the Falcons' pass catchers to score touchdowns. There have been very few passing touchdowns in Atlanta this season. So unless they're playing Tampa Bay, it's a very risky bet. I doubt Penix has earned enough trust after just 1 week of decent play in the NFL. Number 22, we have Carson Wentz at Denver, and I have a very sneaky feeling that he could look fantastic. Maybe not MVP level, but Andy Reid could really revitalize him in this offense. So despite the fact that they won't have any like real starters alongside him, I still see some value here. I still think Reid will make Carson Wentz look like a viable quarterback this week. Number 23, we have Jimmy Garoppolo versus Seattle. And unlike Carson Wentz, I'm not concerned that Garoppolo might get benched in this game. There are some rumors that Wentz won't finish the game, even as the backup getting the start. So maybe that's a safer floor for Garoppolo, but he doesn't have starters to throw to either, so not that excited. But McVay is still the play caller. Maybe it does work out, but I'd rather not trust it. I'd rather avoid any quarterback outside the top 20. At number 24, we have Will Levis, who will get the start, but it's in the rain this week. I have no desire to trust Will Levis. Then at 25, he's not going to start the game, but by the end of the first quarter, he will get full reign of the offense. Mitchell Trubisky does offer some rushing upside, but against the Patriots with Mac Hollins as the number one option, I doubt you'd trust him. I feel really risky with Trubisky, but that rushing upside is why I rank him above Aiden O'Connell. O'Connell probably gets completely locked up by the Chargers, but maybe Brock Bowers does pad his stats. If he throws multiple touchdowns to Bowers, then he will go over double digits. Without it, I think he'll be capped at 10 points. Same with Tyler Huntley. I really never feel confident with Huntley. While he does have some rushing value, it's kind of the only appeal he has. He never throws it very much, and in fantasy football, he still kind of sucks. Then I have Davis Mills, Cooper Rush, and Tanner McKee in the next tier, and I have no idea what to expect here. I think it's like a big yikes with all of them. Like, I don't think Nico Collins will play, so don't trust Davis Mills. No CD Lamb, no way with Cooper Rush. And then I have no idea what's going to happen with the Eagles offense. And then lastly, the last two are Bailey Zappi and Spencer Rattler. And this is the fuck no territory. There's no chance I'm starting them in week 18. Next, let's move on to tight end, where I feel pretty confident in the top three as truly elite options this week. We have Trey McBride versus the Niners at number 1. Last week, he finally started to score touchdowns, and I think they try and do it again. I expect some red zone targets to repeat for McBride. He's been very safe all season, with the exception of that Panthers game 2 weeks ago. Then at number 2, I have Zack Ertz at Dallas, and last week he went off some really high production, especially in overtime. That last touchdown really boosted his numbers in fantasy. But this week, I could envision another elite game, maybe even better than last week, because Ertz has up to $750,000 up for grabs in contract incentives. There are 3 different stat lines he needs to hit, and each of them are worth $250,000 this week. If Zack Ertz catches 9 receptions, he gets $250K. If he turns those 9 catches into 90 receiving yards, he also gets another $250K. And then if he gets not 1, but 2 touchdowns this week, he would get that third $250K bonus I was talking about. So if all 3 of those things hit, Zack Ertz is going to go well over 25 points, and I would absolutely want to bet on that. Ertz, I was tempted to rank at number 1, but after last week, Trey McBride could still do better than that stat line. So definitely start him, I think, at number 2. You have to this week at Dallas. Then at number 3, I wanted to rank Brock Bowers higher, especially given the fact that he also needs 9 receptions to break the all-time tight end receiving record that is currently held by Zack Ertz. So interesting that these two are back-to-back in the rankings this week. But if you look at this matchup, the Chargers are actually one of the toughest matchups for tight ends all year long. They have shut down repeatedly opposing tight ends this season. So that's why I could see them hold him out of the end zone. And that's why with the incentives for Ertz, I'm willing to rank Ertz one spot higher. But all three are in the elite tier. You cannot bench any of those three tight ends, in my opinion. Don't get cute. Don't bench Bowers. If anything, put Ertz in the flex and start both if you have both on your roster. Then I think we're dropping down a tier where we get more touchdown reliant, but still the athleticism and talent is enough to trust with these guys. I definitely think Mark Andrews needs to be in your lineup. In a must-win, expect a blowout versus the Browns, and that's going to come with a Mark Andrews touchdown, at least one, if not two. Then at number 5, we have George Kittle at the Arizona Cardinals, who is still a really good player, but it's a different offense with Josh Dobbs, and maybe that touchdown is not as reliable to hit without Brock Purdy, but still expect a good game from him. I'm still starting George Kittle, but only ranking him at number 5. At number 6, I think Pat Freiermuth is going to have an excellent game this week because that's normally what he does versus the Bengals. If we look at the last 4 career games for Freiermuth versus Cincinnati, he torches them. An average of 10 targets per game, 7 receptions per game for 86 yards per game, and a touchdown. That's an average of 13.6 points per game, and it's very unreliant on touchdowns. So if he doesn't find the end zone, you're still going to get 11 points on average, and if he does, that should skyrocket well above 16. So love Freiermuth this week. I think he's a must-start, very high ceiling. I was worried about him the last 2 games. This week, though, I think he plays excellent against the Bengals. At number 7, I have Sam LaPorta versus the Vikings, and this game will be a shootout, but everyone gets fed in this offense. Expect a touchdown for LaPorta, but probably not more than 50 yards. I think Freiermuth has a better game this week. Then I think we're dropping down a tier, and there is a little more risk, but these next 4 I think are also the tight ends to be starting in your lineup week 18. At number 8, I think Tucker Kraft is always worth a start. He's the best bet to score a touchdown in Green Bay other than Josh Jacobs. I do think he's a top 10 tight end this week. At number 9, I have Jonnu Smith at the Jets. And last week, my concerns on him, I think, were pretty legit. He had a terrible game up until that last drive when he scored a touchdown with like 3 minutes left. So up until that, he was not a great play, but still the touchdown did bail you out. He did go over 10 points, and I did rank him a little too low. But I think from a process standpoint, the risk was definitely there. It's not the same offense without Tua. So you're hoping for a touchdown again, and if you rewind a couple weeks ago, against the Jets back home in Miami, he had a bagel up until overtime, and then he took over and had a touchdown in like 40 yards in just overtime alone. So it could really burn you. I think there is some more risk again, but last week was encouraging, even with Huntley, for him to score a touchdown. That is nice to see. So he's still in the top 10, but I think just like Tucker Kraft, there's a lot of risk, and he's a bit touchdown dependent. I could see him only get you like 4 or 5 points. I'd rather pass if I could, but given the state of the position, I still think Jonnu Smith is top 10 this week. At number 10, I have Mike Gesicki at the Steelers, and Burrow does not have a run game this week with Chase Brown dealing with an ankle sprain, and I do expect a lot of targets for Gesicki. Maybe the touchdown doesn't hit, that rarely kind of happens, but still he's involved in this offense. I trust him from a floor standpoint. You will not get a bagel from Gesicki, and if all you get is 6 points, even that is probably worth starting at tight end this late in the ranks. Number 11, we have Hunter Henry versus Buffalo, and just like Gesicki, I doubt he burns you. Despite the bagel last week, I think it was mainly the matchup against the Chargers, not him shitting the bed. But he did shit the bed. That was terrible, so obviously you may have lost some faith. Maybe he cost you a championship if you started him. But against Buffalo a couple weeks ago, he did play well, he did have a touchdown, and that's why it was encouraging to start him last week. It just didn't work out. And I do expect a bounce back. I would still think Hunter Henry gets involved. He's been the main target for Drake Maye all year long. So at number 11, I'll still go back to the well, but obviously kind of risky at this point. It may not work out, but I doubt it's as bad as last week. Number 12, we have TJ Hockenson at Detroit, and it's a safe floor typically with him. You might get 50 yards, but never really scores a touchdown. However, this game against the Lions should turn into a shootout, and that's why I'd rather bet on it. At number 12, I think he's the last player I'm trying to start at the tight end position. But moving forward, I think we're just streaming the position and there's way more risk involved. And Chig Okonkwo, I don't think is the same player with Will Levis at quarterback. He had great stats with Mason Rudolph, but Levis will get the start this week, and that's why I just don't think he's the same option anymore. Nowhere near as many targets this season from Levis compared to Rudolph on a per game basis. So he's been productive the last 3 games, but no touchdowns to speak of, and that's why I'd rather not trust it. It could work out, but I think you could also really get burned, and without Mason Rudolph, I do not trust Okonkwo anymore as a top 10 option. Number 14, we have Isaiah Likely versus the Browns, and Lamar Jackson probably gets him a touchdown in this blowout game versus the Browns, and if anything, Mark Andrews might get benched early. Likely should dominate targets in the second half. Then at 15, we have Austin Hooper versus Buffalo, who's still involved at a pretty high rate in New England typically. I do trust Henry a bit more, but Hooper sometimes scores touchdowns and is more valuable in this offense. At number 16, Kyle Pitts versus the Panthers has a good matchup. The Panthers have allowed the most touchdowns to tight ends this season. And last week, Pitts did score a touchdown to extend the game into overtime, and that was very encouraging. From Michael Penix, it's good to see some type of chemistry start to develop. But Pitts has been terrible this season, a massive slump before that touchdown, and that's why I wouldn't trust him that much. At number 16, I'm not willing to fully endorse him after just one productive game. Then at 17, we have Will Dissly at the Raiders, and it depends on if Herbert does play. If the Steelers win on Saturday, then they will be benching starters, and Dissly will not have any value. But with Justin Herbert, Dissly could potentially be a top 10 tight end. There is a path for success. He's in this tier with a lot of volatility. I'd probably just pass on him, though. I doubt he's worth a start. And number 18, we saw a decent amount of targets the last 2 games for Payne Durham in the Tampa Bay offense, and Cade Otton is doubtful yet again. So Durham is averaging 8 points per game the last 2 weeks. He does have 1 touchdown and 10 total targets, 7 catches for 65 yards over the last 2 games. Without a touchdown, though, you probably do not get more than 5 points. At number 19, last player in this tier is Noah Fant at the Rams, and Geno needs to play well in order to make up to $6 million in contract bonuses. So Noah Fant could get targeted a decent amount, but from a floor standpoint, that's kind of the only thing you expect from Fant. You rarely go over 5 points with Fant either. Then at 20, we have Brenton Strange at the Colts, who did score a touchdown in week 5 against them the first time. It could happen again, but I'd rather pass on it. Then Jake Ferguson doesn't have a single touchdown on the season without CeeDee Lamb. He is the main target, but I'd rather avoid it as well. And then Tommy Tremble is kind of underrated, is involved in this offense, but too risky to trust. I'm not starting Juwan Johnson, Grant Calcaterra, Cole Kmet, or Tyler Conklin, but they do round out this list. There's a chance they score a touchdown. Without it, you may get bagels. Then let's rank defenses, the last facet of this video. Let's go quickly because in general, you already know who you're starting at defense. But at number 1, I'm ranking the Bucs versus the Saints back here at number 1. Last week I got a bit of pushback and they did pay off. They were way better than most people thought, and I was not taking the cheese. I did not tell you to stream the Colts defense last week. Instead, I was fully endorsing the Bucs, who did have a defensive touchdown at the end of the game, did offer 18 fantasy points, at least in my scoring format. So against Spencer Rattler and the Saints, I definitely trust them again. It's a must-win to lock up the division. They will shut out New Orleans, in my opinion. Then at number 2, we have the Ravens versus Cleveland, who probably shut out the Browns as well. But in garbage time, if they have such a big lead, there's a chance that the Browns come back a little bit. So that's my tiebreaker, why I give the Bucs the edge. I doubt they ever take their foot off the neck of the Saints. Then at number 3, we have the Falcons versus Carolina, who do drop down a tier. There's a chance that Bryce Young plays well enough to burn you, but against Carolina with no Chuba Hubbard, he's their best player. Their offense should struggle once again, just like the Bucs last week. I think the Falcons get a good matchup against the Panthers. Then at number 4, the Chargers are definitely going to stop the Raiders. Maybe they don't stop Brock Bowers, but without Amir Abdullah, I don't trust that run game. The Chargers have been reliably efficient all year long. Then at number 5, I have the Commanders at Dallas with no CeeDee Lamb. I definitely trust them. In a must-win, I do expect them to lock up the number 6 seed with a win at Dallas. Then at number 6, I have the Packers versus Chicago, who are also trying to get that 6 seed, but they don't hold the tiebreaker. They will definitely try their best to lock down the Bears offense. But Caleb Williams is definitely scarier than Cooper Rush, and that's why I'd rather go with the Commanders. Despite the Packers playing super well all year long, they probably force multiple turnovers in this game. So I think the top 6 are all must starts. Definitely defenses I would like to trust. And at number 7, you probably think I'm too low, but the Broncos versus the Chiefs still scare me a little bit. It's still Andy Reid, and I still think Carson Wentz can do some damage. The Broncos, though, have been reliably good this season, and that's why I'd still probably start them. But I think the Chiefs should be ranked right behind them. I still think the Chiefs keep it close, and I'm still convinced that the Chiefs will win the game. I do not trust Bo Nix that much. So maybe I'm way off base. Maybe you don't trust them at all, given they might be benching starters. But in division, I'm sure they would still love to eliminate the Broncos. At number 9 and 10, I would be willing to bet on the Titans-Texans game. There's expected to be a lot of rain in that matchup, and neither offense scares you, so go ahead. And then at 11 and 12, I also think the Jets-Dolphins game is a low-scoring one as well. So take a shot on them if you need to. Inside the top 12 in a 12-team league, I am telling you they're worth a start. But then the last 6 defenses I'd maybe consider if the league was super deep and I'm forced to look to the waiver wire. The Patriots and Bills game could be low scoring given there's a lot of backups in the Bills offense this week. Then the Seahawks-Rams game I think is also pretty interesting. In division, it's probably a low-scoring game. Even with backups for the Rams, I still don't expect more than like 24 points from either side. Then the 49ers-Cardinals game is probably more of a shootout, but also some interesting defenses that might play well. In division, anything can happen, but every single game this week is a division matchup, and that's why I'd probably look elsewhere. I think at 17-18, you're probably going to get burned more likely than not. But they're the last teams in that tier. Moving forward, I'd definitely be benching everyone. The Panthers at the Falcons, no thank you, with Bijan and Algier probably going to torch them. The Eagles, even against the Giants, I still don't trust with a bunch of backups. The Giants in the same game, I probably still don't feel that confident in. The Colts and Jaguars game is probably a shootout as well, with no weather to worry about at all. And then outside this tier, I think the Raiders, Bengals, Cowboys, Vikings, Lions, and Steelers probably all give up over 30 points, no effing chance. I'll trust them. And then the Bears have given up. The Saints definitely give up 40 to Tampa Bay. And the Browns also give up 40 to Baltimore. So no chance with them. That's going to be it for my rankings this week. Here on the screen are my top 20 at quarterback, tight end, and defense. And above the green line is really the last consideration I would give to starting any of these players. I think unless you're in a super flex format and you have to start quarterbacks all the way down to number 20, I would not trust anyone below quarterback 14. I think Geno Smith's the last guy I really want to bet on. At tight end, the last one I want to trust would be TJ Hockenson. And then at defense, the last one I'm trusting would be the Dolphins at the Jets. So good luck to you. I'm definitely trying to start the top 6 quarterbacks, the top 7 tight ends, and hopefully the top 6 defenses. Those are the safest bets, in my opinion. So good luck to you. If you still have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. I will update these ranks tomorrow with all of the injury report news at the last second on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll be helping you out next year as well. In the off season, we'll give you plenty of gems to help you get prepped for next year's draft. So that's it for me. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank you so much for watching. Nice and blunt.